Jill Savage deservedly has the night off, so the boys are in control. Welcome to The Mandate. Welcome in. I'm Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief here at Blaze Media, and joining me all the way from Washington, D.C. is Chris Bedford. We are left alone and unsupervised, Chris. Jill is taking a deserved day off. She never takes a day off, and now it's just you and me, Patriots in control. The mandate.
The mandate, am I
right? Well, there's a lot of things to talk about today. It's the beginning of one hell of a week after a hell of a week. I want to catch up first, Chris, on the events that unfolded over the weekend and recap where we're at right now in this country. I want to begin with Friday night. Erica Kirk delivered an emotional speech from the very room where Charlie used to use his microphone to reach millions around the world.
The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they have done. You have no idea the fire that you have ignited within this wife. The cries of this widow will echo around the world like a battle cry. To everyone listening tonight across America, the movement my husband built will not die. It won't. I refuse to let that happen. It will not die. All of us will refuse to let that happen. No one will ever forget my husband's name, and I will make sure of it.
Chris, I think she made sure that speech will not be lost in the shuffle. It was remarkable, and its effect is still being felt throughout the country.
Right away, there were within hours. Turning Point USA got hundreds of requests from around the country to start new chapters of that organization. People who heard her cry, heard that clarion call, and responded to it.
Okay.
And said that they want to be a part of this, that they want to join this effort, that they have something to bring to this, that the movement that Charlie began isn't going to die, and that it's going to be heard in their communities and in their schools. But it goes beyond that. Charlie's death hangs over every political conversation going on in this country. Every conversation going on in Washington, for sure. They've changed things. I just don't think they've changed things in the way that they'd hoped.
Chris, one of the remarkable things about this weekend is that after that speech, we saw, not protests or angry people in the streets, but we saw prayer vigils, really erupt around the country. And I want to take a look at some of these, and then we'll talk about them. First, this video that you yourself captured last night from the Kennedy Center. Chris, it was not only in America, all throughout America, vigils throughout the country for Charlie Kirk. It was also around the world. Watch this. I mean, truly astounding to see people, all over the world talking, representing, and it was all about Charlie Kirk's untimely murder. Explain to us what it was like at the Kennedy Center last night.
Well, there were no hakas and no South Korean drums, but those were some powerful demonstrations. Having seen the haka live on the rugby field when I was younger, it can be an intimidating gesture, but it's also one of respect. Kennedy Center was wild. I'd been there just the day before to drop my family off to see a show, to see The Sound of Music. And the next evening, Sunday evening, the line was wrapped around the bend. And I thought that was it. But when I got around the bend, It was zigzagged and back and forth like few lines I've actually been in. There was people from all walks of life and people of all ages. There were children not much older than 6 months, I would guess. There were people in their 70s and their 80s. Some folks came there dressed in jacket and tie. Other folks came just seemingly casual. It looks like they'd just come off of their boat. There were couples, there were unmarried, there were whole families, there were professional colleagues. She kept on bumping into people. And then when we got in, we filled that concert hall with, it looked to me like maybe a few hundred who had to sit there and wait as people trickled out when they had to go home in order to get a seat because it was at capacity. When I walked in with my 9-year-old, they were singing hymns, singing songs that took on a different meaning. Kind of things you might hear in an evangelical church about following Jesus, and now there's no turning back. But it took on just a different meaning, knowing that Charlie had died speaking about Christ and speaking about the Bible, and his life had been taken. There was no turning back for him. He had decided to follow Jesus. And everyone knew the words. Everyone knew most of the verses to Amazing Grace. And it was just a prayerful kind of memorial attitude. And another thing that was interesting, that really stood out to me, is this White House administration has been criticized by people at The Nation and the New York Times and the New Republic and other places for not being presidential. These cabinet secretaries for not being as patrician as maybe some of their Republican predecessors had been. And that was certainly not, I don't think that's the case at all, but it was certainly not the case on Sunday evening when you saw people like RFK or Tulsi Gabbard come out. And they so clearly understood not just Charlie, who they both knew personally, not just religious aspects, which was interesting hearing from Tulsi too, who is not a professing Christian. Their ability to draw a nation's founding ideals to the Bible, back to this current moment, and to Charlie and his sacrifice was spoken in such an eloquent way that few people in the first Trump administration, no people in that never happened Romney administration, and I don't even think that many people in George W. Bush's administration would have been able to so coherently pull together. It was an absolute masterclass. It could have been Claremont professors up there, the way that they were talking about these ideas and talking about them very naturally. It didn't seem like it was written by speechwriters, talking about these things from the heart. They really represented the White House well. The crowd really represented themselves well. And I think, well, there were certainly tears. There was also a lot of happiness, just a lot of faith in the air. And I ended up, when I first got there, hoping, I didn't know what kind of event was this going to be. Was it going to be political? Was it going to be like a convention? Or was it going to be intimate, personal, and moving? And it was certainly the latter. And when we had to get home, because it's school night, I had to get home and mom was already asleep and the baby had been put down. My son didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay there. He was in rapt attention. And since he is just 9, he knew that something had happened. They talked about it at school. But I wanted him to see what kind of person Charlie was and to remember this moment. And there was one part where, geez, I'm getting choked up again, where he got me. We left a little early and we were waiting for the car to come pick us up. And we're looking up at the big montage in the side of the Kennedy Center Hall, all these pictures of John F. Kennedy. And he says, wasn't he assassinated too, Dad? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. And it was also on television. It was also something that was seen. And something that this country has had to grapple with and live with in the years and decades since. I was happy he drew that connection, and I was happy he was there with me. It was a beautiful tribute, and it was just one of many around this entire country.
Well, I think there are many young people who are making that connection, and this really is for them a moment like it was for those who lived through the JFK assassination. I mean, there's no way around that. It's not an exaggeration for so many young people. And I want to get to, as you said, members of the administration really stepping up. We're going to get to J.D. Vance. We're going to get to Stephen Miller and their remarks today. But first, I just want to take a little look. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slop, but I want to take a little look on what is in fact moving people in the middle throughout this country, and that is the reaction on the other side. If we could just play one short clip, I promise you, of what the left is saying right now.
The best part of this whole goddamn thing is that he is not martyr material, so his death will mean nothing. It will activate no one. It will impact few. It's just great.
I mean, you combine that, Chris, with the fact that what we saw from legacy media this weekend was an immediate attempt to try to bizarrely say that this attack came from, a MAGA family, possibly a Groyper or someone on the far right. You combine this with the fake Trump slur, the stuff saying that this was a Trump supporter, and it really has been an awful weekend for the mainstream media in this country. And I don't see it as mainstream anymore after this. I think this is the turning of the tide.
Yeah, it's no longer even mainstream. It's just corporate. We get as many views. Newsmax gets as many views. Fox blows them out of the water. The Daily Caller, the Washington Examiner, Washington Free Beacon. They've got the same audience. They're beating Caitlin Collins and her 9 p.m. hour whenever she comes on. They're beating a lot of these folks. There is no more mainstream. They have no more dominance, and this is exactly the sort of reason for it. I'm actually super concerned about some of these Groyper lies and some of the complete and total unwillingness to actually face any kind of reality or truth on this, because it is seeping in. Mm-hmm. I mean, my wife was getting messages from a guy, the mother of someone who she dated when she was a freshman in college, saying a Groyper did it. He was responding to some comment that she'd made in Howie Kurtz over the weekend, saying, "Well, don't you know? He was killed by a Groyper." I don't even think most of these people don't even know what the heck a Groyper is. It's a weird internet bunch of strange people. But this lie has reached out to the middle of the country, not very politically involved moms who are scrolling through the internet. It's everywhere. You're seeing it echoed by top people. And what's creepy about that video you just showed is that, just like the shooter, you're not seeing a bunch of nose piercings and blue hair and other signs of mental illness or extreme beliefs. These folks are masquerading. They look like you and me. It's not fringe. That just shows you that this is not the sort of thing that is part of the fringe anymore. It's coming out of the normal looking mouths of attractive and happy looking seeming people on the outside, but inside they're harboring just soulless hate and just awful viciousness towards their fellow countrymen, towards Christians. It's like they're sleeper cells, and that's a whole nother line of creepy.
Yeah, this point can't be emphasized enough, that we're talking about radical ideology that somehow is now in control of the media apparatus and what millions and millions of people, who knows, 30%, 40% of the population who are actually saying these things. And I think the alarming thing for many normal Americans is they're seeing, right, friends and colleagues and normal people say terrible things in the wake of this tragedy. But we're going to talk more about that in the coming days. I want to get to what J.D. Vance had to say today when it comes to how to combat this political violence.
So when you see someone celebrating Charlie's murder, call them out. And hell, call their employer. We don't believe in political violence, but we do believe in civility. And there is no civility in the celebration of political assassination. Get involved. Get involved. Get involved. It's the best way to honor Charlie's legacy. Start a chapter of TPUSA or get involved in the one that already exists. If you're older, volunteer for your local party, write an op-ed in your local paper, run for office. I can't promise you this is going to be easy. I can't promise you that all of us will avoid Charlie's fate. I can't promise you that I will avoid Charlie's fate. But the best way to honor him is to shine the light of truth like a torch in the very darkest places. Go do it.
Chris, you see JD there, some incredible moments today on Charlie's show, but they're trying to channel that energy that's out there into something positive.
He is. He's doing an excellent job. He did an excellent job co-hosting today. He had some really emotional and touching messages especially about that plane ride home with Charlie, because they were close, they were friends. And I think, very few outlets have really been able to figure out on the outside just how seismic this is. We've talked about it. I've written about it. You and I have talked about it. Our show has talked about it. If you follow Blaze, then you know all about how seismic this is if you're actually attached to normal America. But there are people like that woman who you played earlier who just didn't have any understanding of one, who Charlie was. They're defaming him, making up quotes, lying about him, saying he was some kind of an awful person. And they're so disconnected from reality, and they're so disconnected from the actual reaction. And I think there's actually one reporter who I've been following in DC. He's a British reporter who writes Playbook now. And since he's not part of the he didn't come up through the American extremist press media. He's just certainly a liberal, but he just looks at this whole thing and says, "Whoa, boys, girls, everyone's screwing up here. This is really bad. Democrats are behaving really poorly. Do you understand how personally and viscerally this administration is reacting? How many tears we're seeing in the White House? How the vice president canceled his 9/11 duties to fly to take a widow home and his friend's body home? They don't. He keeps on warning them, like, "Hey, you guys got to take this more seriously, because this administration has been more personally impacted by this murder, this assassination than we've seen in a very
Yes.
very long time." They deeply care. We all deeply care, and I am very hopeful that as much as 2020 and COVID got people to start getting involved, that people just get involved and stay involved, because we need to pick up that microphone and we need to keep on going.
Yeah, this requires a change in the way of life, a change in the way in how we relate to, how we are civically minded and active in America. And, well, look, we don't have all the details yet, but we do know some things. The looming question is, how did a kid from what seemed to be a right-leaning family radicalize and turn into a killer? Chris and I will talk about that next. Look, some bourbons chase trends, but Flying Ace chases legacy. This is the straight bourbon the way it was meant to be: bold, balanced, and unapologetically American. There's no gimmicks, there's no fluff. It's just real whiskey made for people who still believe in hard work, high standards, and doing things the right way. Whether you're winding down after a long day or raising a glass with good company, Flying Ace delivers every time. And I know this because Jill Savage gave me some of this early on when they first became a sponsor. And I have to say, that bottle disappeared quickly at my house. It's not about hype. It's about heritage and getting back to what bourbon was always supposed to be. If that sounds like your kind of pour, it's time to level up. Buy online at flyingacespirits.com and use Blaze for free shipping. That's code BLAZE for free shipping at flyingacespirits.com. So the question that everyone is asking is, how did we get here? And there's a 50,000-foot level to that involves the last 10, 20, 30 years of American life, in which you see the left erecting its own unwritten, functional, constitution, if you will, of ruling institutions like media, politics, etc. We're going to be unpacking that stuff too. But the more proximate question is, how did this individual, this assassin, go from a kid being raised in Utah in what seems like a right-leaning family and become radicalized? Chris, I think that there's a lot that we need to be careful about here because, everything's still swirling. There's a lot of things that people have uncovered online. There's some things that the FBI has been saying, both Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. But there are some things that we do, in fact, know at this point.
Yeah, we do have to be careful, but we know that he was deeply involved with technology as a young guy. And this is something that used to be understood, but I think it's really been lost by parents over the last couple decades, that you can have a home that eats dinner around the table at night, plays sports after school. You can have a home that is loving and caring, but there are dark corners of the internet that when you let your kid into their computer world, they're communicating with people, finding ideas, going back and forth with demons, essentially, things that are able to corrupt them. I've now that I got kids of my own and I'm raising them, I've spent a good deal of time talking to parents who were really successful and parents who maybe felt like their kids hadn't followed the path that they'd hoped that they would. Unfortunately, there's a lot of that in America these days, a lot of that. And ask them kind of what happens. What are some of the conversations you have? What do you go back and think? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? Or what did your parents do? And how were you raised? I mean, one thing I'll tell you I found is extremely important is religion. I don't know anything about the inside of this family, and I'm not even talking specifically about them. But I've learned from people who've fallen away from the church, as opposed to people who have raised their children in it, that you can't. It's not enough to go to Catholic school. Heck, the Cuomos went to Catholic school. Pelosi went to Catholic school. I think Gavin Newsom might have even gone to Catholic school. It's not enough to even just go to church on Sunday. It needs to be a daily part of your conversation. You need to pray at night with your kids. You need to talk about it. You need to, if you're Catholic, pray the rosary. Have crucifixes in your house. If you're evangelical or Protestant, you've got to be reading and you got to be pursuing your own different sorts of ways to bring your faith at home and to live it daily. It can't just be dad sleeping in or mowing the lawn while mom takes the kids to church or they won't follow. They need to see dad on his knees praying at night to God. These are the sorts of things, these are the sorts of ways that you actually instill those values in a way that even if they are forgotten for a few drunken years in college, they are regained because they've been implanted in you when you were 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And by the way, sit in the front row. I started off sitting in the back row, and the kids don't behave because I can't see anything.
Yeah.
They have no idea what's going on. They're looking at some dusty back. They need to be at the front and actually be able to get an idea of this. And I know that can be a battle with the 85-year-olds who want to sit in the front and be seen by everyone, but you got to get your kids up there. They're the future, and don't be embarrassed when they cry. You can't just raise your kid with values by watching it, turning on Blaze or Fox News or Newsmax or whatever you want to watch. You can't just turn it on and watch TV until you get mad and know that the kids hear it in the next room. You can't just vote Republican or wear an American flag T-shirt and have an American flag bumper sticker and think that's going to instill anything in your children. You need to read the stories of our founding. You need to read the history. You need to celebrate the holidays, and not just with grill and burgers. Memorial Day is about more than that. You need to teach them history and not just what to think, because kids will rebel. They do. I mean, conservative parents having jerk lib kids who aren't assassins is a normal part of life, or liberal parents having conservative kids, even because kids rebel and they want to go for the things. So what you have to do is teach them really how to think. And even just going through high schools, for example, and looking at the different private schools and the different opportunities to get a classical education, which you compare that to the public schools and even Northern Virginia. Northern Virginia is a place that's got some wealth to it. It's also got some poverty to it, but it's a lot of it is suburbs. I heard from a guy last night that his kid, who's 10 years old and 11 years old, they're not even getting homework because the teachers don't trust that families will even get involved. And they make them do work at school instead where they can supervise it. The parents have no part in this education. They're not even overseeing what their kids are doing. And they're not training the kids to be able to work after that bell rings, which is an essential skill if you want to be successful in high school, or you want to go to college, or you want to go into a trade. You need to have that sort of thing. But I was also looking at some of these classical schools, which they take a chunk out of your paycheck. They really do. And I said to a friend of mine, well, geez, you pay for all this and then you pay for college. I mean, how are mom and dad ever going to retire? And he said, I don't really care where the kids go to college because by the time they do, they're 18, if they even go, and they're formed. If I have sent them to classically trained education school, Christian school, if I've taught them well at home about how to think, not just what to think, if we've discussed the Bible, then they're not going to come out of a year of college or 2 years of college, some snotty liberal who just learned Christopher Columbus, maybe a bad guy. By the way, that's fake news. They're not. It's not going to happen because they've been well formed as young people, and that's when their mind is most malleable. And you send out a well formed guy, send them to the state school, send them to the local school, send them wherever you want. They don't need to go to the fanciest places, the most expensive places, because you've already formed a young man or a young woman who's going to do a lot better. And people just trust the system. They trust the computers. They say the video games are fine. They They assume that they're getting taught at class. They assume that an hour in church a week is okay, and that's not enough. Families need to be involved.
Yeah, it is. This is exactly right, because you got to have a heart for parents out there when you look at this. I mean, you have this transgender, transvestite discord. The FBI is definitely looking at all these individuals talking as if they knew something about what was going to happen September 10th. This appeared on the internet, pretty early on, and now you do have some chatter about it, even from officials who are definitely going to be asking all these individuals that Robinson was palling around with, what was going on here. And the transgender aspect, it seems very real in this case, where you throw that into the mix. But if we step back and just talk about what parents should do, you got the internet out there, right, with these strange corners like this chat and the people that the murderer was was palling around with. And then you also have the schools themselves, though, which, they're not necessarily going to turn your kid into an assassin, but they're going to turn your kid into the kind of person who says Charlie Kirk was a bad guy and it's good this happened and he deserved it, because that's absolutely what many college professors seem to be saying across the country. And of course, that's no surprise. Should be no surprise. We already know that both the K through 12 system and the university system has been corrupted for decades. In fact, you could say that the entire conservative movement starts with William F. Buckley writing God and Man at Yale back in whatever it was, 1955, I believe. So we've had almost a generation, right, of people. Right. So we're talking, we're talking about a 75-year-old movement that starts saying godlessness and communism is being taught at Yale. And we've been complaining about it for all that time. So we're now at the point where if you don't take your kids out of that system, I hate to say it because it's difficult to do, right? I mean, it's something we've struggled with, since we had kids in our family, but we've never done it. We never just put them into the system because we know how bad it is and how terrible it is. And I'm still shocked at, people who are great people, friends of mine, who won't sometimes take that measure. And if you don't do that, you're going to be getting it from the internet. You're going to be getting radical, insane ideology from the internet, and you're also going to be getting it, in a more pernicious way almost for most kids in school. And so this is just a wake-up call where that entire system has to be dismantled at this point, or you're going to get more of what you see now, which is otherwise normal people saying we're celebrating the assassination of our political opponents.
Yeah. You have to take care of where you send people. The old last generation system of trust, it doesn't work anymore. You want your kid to get a Catholic education, you better not be sending them to Notre Dame. I'm sorry that you liked the movie Rudy. It's not a Catholic school. Georgetown isn't either. You got to go to look to the Cardinal Newman Society, pull up the names of colleges that they back. Those are actually giving you a Catholic education. Same thing with the high schools. Demand to look in those books. Demand to see what those textbooks are. We've had friends. I've talked to mutual friends of ours who said that they were pulling through the local Christian school, thinking this might be a good spot, and they went through the history books and realized, whoa, nope, this is as bad as all the rest of them. It's been captured. It cannot be trusted. We're going to a different school. That's something that's really important with these folks. The internet is constantly pulling at them. You might have some distant memories of stealing Playboys when you were a kid and think that that's what pornography is. That's not what pornography is. It's a really dark and demonic, massive space at the fingertips of any child you give a smartphone to. There's one kid in my son's fourth grade class who already has an iPhone. He's not allowed to bring it to school. But that is psychotic parenting. That is bad parenting, just through and through, to allow your child who's 9 years old to have access to, and for the internet to have access to them. That's the kind of thing that warps a mind and changes people. People like Steve Jobs convinced an entire generation that they're going to send you iPads, and this was an act of generosity, not addiction and mind-numbing. And by the way, the rich kids don't do that anymore. The rich schools don't have iPads and screens. It didn't improve anything. But the poor and the middle class absolutely still do. They haven't gotten quite the memo that this sort of stuff is really dangerous. And the college campus thing, well, the internet leads maybe the final stages of your darkest radicalization, the gender bending, the pornography, the this and the that, the violence. There's a reason why people like Matt Walsh, who's an internet commentator, Ben Shapiro, who's a talk show host, are as high in the Blue Anon assassination list after Charlie Kirk as actual important, powerful people like Stephen Miller or Elon Musk. And the reason is because they break that cardinal rule of the modern university, which is an anti-intellectual fortress where you're invading their safe space and causing violence to them if you present an alternative opinion on their college campus. That mentality, that siege mentality, is one of the reasons that Charlie Kirk was shot on a campus, not in his home, not in a parking garage, not outside of his office, but on a college campus, because he was considered an invading force for going there to talk about the gospel and to talk about conservative ideas and to answer questions from the crowd. And that kind of sick philosophy is not just stupid, like we used to make fun of with that great movie PCU. It's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be talking more about that here at The Blaze and in the pages of theblaze.com. We're also going to be talking about something that no one wants to talk about, which is the psychosexual dimensions of a lot of this madness, where, for most people, this causes just brain rot. I mean, you just dump in all this stuff on them, just aberrant forms of sexuality. People start congregating around it, and then very bizarre and dark things start to happen. And it's for most people, it's just a kind of brain rot, but for some people, it becomes something much, much more dangerous. And no one wants to talk about that, but I guarantee we will on our pages very soon. Yes. But we have something else to talk about. Coming up next, we're going to talk with someone about what actually needs to be done. What needs to be done by the U.S. government right now in order to stop all of this madness when it comes to the NGOs and the politically lunatic activist groups that are fomenting all this political violence. Coming up next. Hey, as editor-in-chief of Blaze Media, I want to thank you for watching and listening to this show. Blaze TV only exists because people like you refuse to settle for watered-down coverage and endless spin. This has never been about one voice or one company. This is about a movement of people who refuse to sit on the sidelines in these trying times. And we need to carry this mission forward. When you subscribe, you're not just supporting a show. You're making sure the truth has a platform today and for the next generation. Join Blaze TV today at blazetv.com/BNT and get $20 off right now. For as low as $8 a month on the annual plan, you can be part of shaping the future. That's blazetv.com/BNT. Well, Stephen Miller joined J.D. Vance on Charlie's show today, and he made perfectly clear that the administration intends to dismantle the political groups that are fomenting political violence and hatred throughout this country. Watch this.
We are going to channel all of the anger that we have over the organized campaign that led to this assassination to uproot and dismantle these terrorist networks. So let me explain a little bit what that means. The organized doxing campaigns, the organized riots, the organized street violence, the organized campaigns of dehumanization, vilification, posting people's addresses, combining that with messaging that's designed to trigger and incite violence, and the actual organized cells that carry out and facilitate the violence. It is a vast domestic terror movement. And with God as my witness, we are going to use every resource we have at the Department of Justice, Homeland Security, and throughout this government to identify, disrupt, dismantle, and destroy these networks and make America safe again for the American people. It will happen, and we will do it in Charlie's name.
Amen to that. Well, here to discuss this and more is my friend and friend of the show, Kyle Shideler. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Matt.
It's sadly you are without Jill today. It's just me solo, but we have a lot to discuss. I know this is something you work on, you are working on. This is something that you spoke about this issue way back in the BLM days, and I believe wrote about it, what needs to be done to go after these activists, domestic terrorist groups in this country. And what's astounding to me that, it's sad that we have to be here now after this horrific tragedy and talking about it again. I hope that something is actually done, but please explain what sorts of things should be done.
Well, I'm very heartened by what Stephen Miller had to say, and it sounds like they're on the right track. The challenge I think that they're going to have is getting the federal bureaucracy in alignment with what needs to be done. First and foremost, they're going to need to get the federal bureaucracy to accept that there is such a thing as far left extremism, that there's a category for it which they can put such acts into. They're going to need to get the federal bureaucracy to define what it is, and then they're going to have to orchestrate all elements of government power to take it on.
Well, wait a minute.
Let's
Just slow down a minute. So it's harder than it sounds, because if I'm just common sense American listening to you right now, I'm saying, wait a minute, wait, what? They don't have a category for leftist violence? Like there's no radical extreme left category for them to go after? What are you even talking about?
Well, so the federal government dumps pretty much every anti-government extremist into the same category. They have anti-government and anti-authority violent extremists. And that could include everything from your very far right, sort of lunatic survivalist somewhere in the woods who thinks the government is out to get him, which might usually be put on the right. And it could hypothetically also include your left-wing anarchist cells, your Antifa types. They would both be covered under the same category, theoretically. The problem with that is because you have such a broad category, the federal bureaucracy essentially gets to decide how it's going to spend its time. Furthermore, they divide up far left extremism under other categories as well. So, for example, your pro-abortion extremists and your pro-environmentalist extremists all get put under different categories as if they're a totally separate thing. And the reality is that very often they're the same people, or they move from one side to another. You know, you take a look at somebody like Unity of Field's Calla Walsh. This is somebody who's been active in pro-Palestinian sabotage events and is now running a terror propaganda network where they openly laud the killing of Americans and Israelis, as took place when the 2 Israeli embassy staffers were killed. They lauded that attack. And now, this is somebody that has advocated on behalf of the Cuban government. They participated in BLM activities. They also participated in environmentalist direct action protests and the like. So you have one individual who, if you're following the federal government's categories, would be spread out under a variety of different categories, and they would be treated as if they weren't all the same thing. So what we need to do is get the federal government to recognize a category of far left violent extremism and put under that category all of your anarchist, autonomous Marxist, your Marxist-Leninists, your Maoists, your violent socialists, and the like, and say these are all one thing. These are all a movement that is working towards revolution in the United States, that's working towards the overthrow of the United States government, and we're going to take them on. But as long as they remain divided up as if they're somehow a totally different thing, you're able to ignore the fact that it exists. And the government has done that for a very long time. And so has academia. I mean, we saw, congressmen on the left come out and say right-wing violence is obviously greater than left-wing violence. Look at this study. And a couple of Twitter anons dug into the details of the study, and it turns out they didn't count half a dozen attacks that had taken place on the left. They simply ignored them, or in some cases, they attributed the attack to someone on the right, even though it was conducted by someone on the left. And we had that case, for example, with the firebombing of the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania, where even Governor Josh Shapiro himself failed to note that it was a left-wing individual who conducted that attack on behalf of the Palestinian ideology.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So first, what you're saying, we have to make the bureaucrats honest. We have to hold them accountable, and they have to have a category to actually acknowledge and see left-wing violence, because they don't acknowledge that whatsoever now, and this has been going on for a very long time. Okay, let's say we do that. Let's say they put out the memo, they change whatever they need to change, and they say, all right, now there is a category for left-wing extremism that you, as part of the law enforcement complex, are going to start paying attention to. What should they do next?
Well, I would argue that they should move to conduct a number of designations against Antifa-linked groups, primarily in Europe, but across the world. Now, you could argue, and I think it would be legitimate, for a single terrorism designation against Antifa as a foreign terrorist organization. The problem you're going to run into is that the way the U.S. government uses terrorism designations now is they designate the smallest possible group. So you'll see the United States government designate Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and so on ad infinitum. So they spend their time designating the smallest possible group, even though they should all be covered by a larger designation. But if you try to designate just Antifa as a single entity or movement, what I suspect you'll find is that the bureaucrats will say, we don't know what that is. That's not a thing that exists. So the way I would approach it is to find a number of foreign Antifa groups that'll be more easily designated. The Germans, for example, just recently prosecuted a so-called hammer gang, which has conducted assaults against people across national borders for the past couple of years. Designate a group like that. Then you tie that group back to an international Antifa network, like, for example, the International Antifa Defense Fund or a similar group that spreads across national borders. Then you go after US-based groups that are also tied to that international network. And so you build a series of designations that way. I think that will, in the long run, be faster and more effective. Although if the Trump administration decides to go for the throat and ask for a foreign terrorism designation of Antifa, obviously I would support it.
Yeah, I see that book, Unmasking Antifa, in the background. I believe you had something to do with that. We've talked about Antifa a lot in the past, and now you have many people claiming this murder, this assassination, was at least Antifa adjacent when it comes to this trans or transvestite community that seems to be related to the killer. What you're saying, though, sounds like, take it internationally, then they can't deny it. The bureaucrats within the government, I want to point this out to the audience, can't deny it, and you build a case from there and you work back to Antifa in America because they have refused so long to acknowledge that any of these groups are actually existing or a thing, a real entity. So that leads to just a bigger problem in general, which is if the bureaucracy is loaded with people who have been trained their entire adult life to find far-right extremism under every rock, will they ignore the violence of the left? How in the hell are you going to get those people to turn the train around and focus on the actual killers amongst us?
Well, I think there are good people inside federal law enforcement who want to do the right thing, who want to make cases, against the people who are fomenting violence on the streets, who want to make cases against the people who are targeting federal law enforcement, for that matter. I think those people exist inside federal law enforcement. I think they would do a good job if they were allowed to do it. I think most of the resistance actually comes probably from middle and upper management in some of these bureaucracies. Mm-hmm. I think your street agents would be very excited to make these cases. But the question is, are they getting access to good information? Do they have access to analysts and experts who can describe for them what they are seeing? That I was actually extremely pleased when Steven Crowder came out with that ATF memo that described the shell casings as anti-fascist ideology. That was absolutely correct. And that would be a statement that would be very difficult to get elements of the federal bureaucracy to admit. But we saw them do it in that case, and I was pleased that they did and that they were so straightforward about it. So I think you can change the corner on this or turn the corner on this. But it has to be clear that these are the cases that they're going to get supported. If you want to be making the big cases and helping your career, this is what the administration thinks is a threat to national security and is a threat to the nation. And we're going to push these big cases. We're going to get wins. We're going to get prosecutions. And if you want a part of that, these are the targets you should be going after. And I think that could be convincing to members in federal law enforcement, as long as the Trump administration is willing to do the hard work of figuring out these categories, figuring out these designations and definitions, and operating accordingly.
Well, there will be a lot more to talk about with you, Kyle, as coming days and weeks unfold, and we will check in with you again, I'm sure. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
Well, that last segment is very, very important stuff. This is the kind of thing that people are talking about in Washington, D.C. right now. People are talking about throughout the country when it comes to the response to this act of political terrorism. And that is first and foremost, if you listen to what Kyle said, you have to designate these groups as terrorist organizations. The fact that Antifa has not been designated as a terrorist organization yet shows how unserious we have been for years in this country. After BLM, after the riots, after the violence that swept through this country in city after city, we did not take those sorts of measures. We did not actually label Antifa, for instance, a terrorist organization. Now, Kyle's point is the easiest way to do that, to get around the bureaucracy, is to go where it's very clear, which is internationally. Call the international Antifa organizations terrorists, designate them that, and then a bunch of legal stuff falls into play for the bureaucrats. And then you say, oh, look, this money is also coming around here, and you designate them a terrorist organization, and that makes it easier for law enforcement to go after them. This is the kind of argument that we're going to be bringing you over and over again at Blaze. What should be done, and how do we do it? Kyle is going to try to advise people in the administration about this. People are talking about this on the daily. What you're seeing all over is something much more serious than we've seen in the past in every sector. I know this. I know that you feel it too. I was thinking the other day, we're witnessing the rise of a very different right, one that's active, one that's taking action in response to Charlie Kirk's assassination. This is different than it was before. You can feel it. Where people are at work. They're not just sitting around. They're going out and going after people and holding them accountable for their atrocious words and sentiments, rooting for political murder. That's not acceptable in America, as the vice president said today. But what you see are people holding them to account online. I mean, I have friends and relatives telling me, did you see what this professor said? Did you see what this person said? You see people actually taking action. You also see prayer. You see a return to church this weekend, a surge in people going back to church and holding not angry protests, but prayer vigils throughout this nation. That's the sort of thing that shows the depth of seriousness that has arisen in this country, in this MAGA Maha movement, and what really propels it. And it's in no small part, this preparedness, this action, this turn to actually solve the problem. It's there in no small part because of the role that Charlie Kirk himself played in transforming and evolving the right into what you see today. It's because of Charlie himself that all of us are ready now to take the next step in this moment. And that is, I think, what's going to happen. This time will not be like the times before. What does that mean? That means that the entire system that the left has raised up in this country, in institution after institution, will now be systematically dismantled. And it must be if we are to prevent the rise of violence and even worse in this country. That means the media, that means the educational system, that means all the NGOs that support these activist groups, which ultimately lead to terrorist organizations targeting individuals and gunning them down in the streets. That entire apparatus needs to be investigated. It needs to be looked at with the full force of law. So I hope that Stephen Miller's words today represent the entirety of this administration, and I think they do, and we were going to see this implemented over the next year. This time will not be like the times before. Thank you. You all have a good night. We'll see Jill Savage again here tomorrow.